Welcome to the Animal Studies screencast. This screencast covers lessons 3 through 7. Don't forget to order your animals ahead of time. If you have not already ordered your animals, stop this screencast. Go in the boxes that were delivered to your school, find those animal order forms, and order your animals. I like to do this at least 2 weeks ahead of time so I have a chance to prepare the students and prepare the animal habitats. First, you'll need the African dwarf frogs, then the fiddler crabs, and lastly, you'll need the millipedes. Once you've ordered them, how do you prepare for the animals that will become part of your classroom community? Well, you have to set up their habitats, and you have two choices. You could add an extra lesson and have the students set up the small classroom habitats ahead of time. This will give them more time to ask questions, to wonder about these animals, or you can set up a larger classroom habitat. Now, it's important to note about the African dwarf frogs that if you have this unit during the winter, they don't like New England winters. They are used to temperatures that are 72 degrees to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. So I highly suggest setting up a tank with a heater and a filter. Now, heaters are inexpensive, around $15 to $20, and there are also Pets in the Classroom grants that you can look into for this supplies. African clawed frogs are a little bit hardier. They can survive at much cooler temperatures, so they may be okay in the smaller habitat, but in the wintertime, the African dwarf frogs will pass away pretty quickly. Now, it's important to note not to store any animal habitats in direct sunlight, near a drafty window, or near a radiator, because those are areas of really extreme temperature. So we want them at room temperature as much as possible. So after I prepare their habitat and they arrive, how do I take care of them every day? Well, don't worry, you're going to have the students help you, and your teacher's guide is full of very helpful information. When you open the boxes, you'll also find an animal care sheet that tells you how to transition the animals from the box to their classroom habitat. I like these Petco care sheets because they give a little bit more information about habitat maintenance, things to look for, and characteristics. I introduce my students to these Petco care sheets because this is something they can look at when they're thinking about getting a pet. I always ask them, do you have enough time to care for the pet? Can you do everything that's required? This is a great unit to teach students responsibility. Let's dive into lesson 3, living in the water. So this is where the students meet the dwarf African frogs. They actually get to make their habitat, which you can see there are these really nice directions that are in the teacher's guide and the student activity book. They use the smaller clear bins and a cup of gravel as a slope. They put the paper in to gently pour in the conditioned water. Now, it's very important you condition the water ahead of time. You can either leave water out in a bucket for 24 hours or use the water conditioner that comes in the kit. After they put the frogs in, they get to feed them, and then they write down observations and record questions in their notebook. Welcoming a new animal into the classroom can be interesting. This is very exciting for students, and I found just letting them observe the animal without touching it for 5 to 10 minutes and talk about what they're seeing with their friend helps them to be more focused later on in the lesson. So every time we introduce a new animal into the classroom, I always give them that time and the space to get acquainted with that animal and kind of get that extra energy and excitement out. On to lesson 4, observing the frogs more closely. So they do observe the frogs again, and this is where you talk about scientific diagramming. So what is it? Why do scientists draw a scientific diagram? How does it help them with the work that they're doing? Well, I use this as a pre-assessment. I tell students to observe the African dwarf frogs and draw a scientific diagram. And I walk around the room and I see how detailed they're drawing it. Then I ask for a volunteer to put it on the overhead, and I put a real frog in a cup with water next to it, and I say, I see spots on this frog, but not on the drawing. I see black lines on this frog, but not on the drawing. How could I change this drawing to make it more scientific? And then what I do is I do a scientific diagram as a think aloud. But I have the students participate. I say, now I'm going to draw the frog like a scientist would. And I say, what shape is the frog's body? And they say, Miss Rosa, it's more triangular at the top, but rounder in the rest of the body. So then I'll draw what they tell me to draw. And as you can see, these two pieces of student work come from the same student in that particular lesson. So this is the first one on the left, and then this is their new and improved African dwarf frog after that scientific diagramming lesson. Lesson 5, they get to meet the fiddler crabs. Now it's important to note you do have to mix the soil and the sand ahead of time and make sure you have salt water available. But they get to build the habitat, then they introduce the crabs into the habitat, they feed them, and they get to make observations and record questions again in their notebook. Now, they can actually hold the fiddler crabs, which they really enjoy. I have some animal care rules in my classroom. Animals are like babies, so be very careful with them. Always wash hands before and after handling animals. And then always hold them over their habitat, because it's much better if they fall 6 inches into their habitat opposed to 3 feet on the floor. And then if an animal falls, don't move your feet. Either pick it up if you feel comfortable doing that, or tell the teacher right away. But we don't want to accidentally step on an animal. So another thing they do in lesson 5 is this habitat information table. You can put this on a big chart paper in your classroom, and what they do at the top is they write the name of the animal and then all the information they need to know about its habitat. Lesson 6, observing the fiddler crabs more closely. Again, this is a chance for us to practice our scientific diagramming skills. And as you can see, the student did a before and an after, and then they actually took the opportunity to do it a third time because they thought that they could do it much more improved. So you can see the continuation of the different drawings and how they improved each time. And it's a great opportunity to talk about structure. Why does the male fiddler crab have one large claw? What does he use it for? Why are there hairs on the fiddler crab's 8 legs? What is the purpose of those hairs? And you can have very interesting discussions about how they have these adaptations and how that connects to the environment they live in. Lesson 7, observing the behavior of the frogs and the crabs. So what they do is they do some comparing and contrasting of their observations. Now, it's really important to read the teacher background because there's lots of scientific terminology about the different behaviors that you could teach the students. Like claw waving is a specific behavior that males do to attract the females. And if you have the African dwarf frogs, you'll see them shoot up to the top, and what they're doing is they're actually breathing some air and then go right back down to the bottom. So the students will pick up on all these different observations, and you're going to help them by sharing with them the scientific terminology of these different behaviors and how they're discussing that the animals are using their structures. So that's it for this screencast. Enjoy the fiddler crabs and the African dwarf frogs, and I'll see you in the next set of screencasts.